Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Here we catch up with several news stories twice a week that I consider to be the most impactful. Then we discuss them together in the comments so I don't have to suffer alone and you don't have to suffer alone. And I do mean it. Please do give me your feedback, questions, suggestions, criticism, whatever you wish. I read all of it and I really do truly appreciate it. It helps me tailor the segment further to your needs and curiosities. Let's go. I know it's been probably a month since you've last seen me, and I'm so sorry, but we're back to regularly discussing the news together. I was on a very difficult trip back to the United States. It was supposed to be something of a, little mini vacation back home. And it turned out to be a very big work trip where I spent 7 days in DC talking to various politicians about Ukraine, about the American election, and gaining a lot of insight into what's happening. I then also visited some friends in Canada and worked there as well. And now I'm back in Kyiv to my favorite things on the planet. Air alerts. That's sarcastic if you didn't realize. But anyways, it's time to dive into the news, and even a month later, of course we're starting this segment, again, with Russia terrorizing Ukraine and committing horrendous crimes against humanity and murdering Ukrainian civilians, either in their sleep or on their way back to work. An investigation has been launched because Russians have been shooting down civilians in Selidova. Selidova is an area right near the front line. It's a city that has been completely destroyed as of this moment. The Prosecutor General's office has initiated an investigation following reports of Russian soldiers shooting civilians in Selidova. A video circulating on Telegram shows Russian troops allegedly firing automatic weapons at a car, injuring one of the two people in it. Ukrainian soldiers later rescued the wounded individual from the line of fire. Additionally, 2 women were reportedly shot in the private sector of Selidova after Russian occupation forces entered the area. If you don't understand where Selidova is located, it's actually right near Pokrovsk and Pervomaiske. These 2 cities are probably more familiar to you. I actually used to have friends who were based in Selidova and who were fighting at the front. But unfortunately, their base was leaked and Russians have destroyed it along with the rest of the city and the Novopochta where I used to send packages to. There is still a couple of civilian people living in that area because, as you know, a lot of Ukrainian civilians, especially older ones, have a really hard time leaving the areas where military action is taking place, not because they don't have the opportunity to. We do have a lot of evacuation teams, but because they simply don't want to. It's their home and they grew up there and they've been there their whole life and they don't feel like they should be giving it up to Russians. So unfortunately, a lot of really horrendous things are happening there, and I do understand that these people willingly choose to live near the front line, but at the same time, Russians know they're civilian and they're not supposed to target them, but they do. And in this episode, I'm going to do something I haven't done before. I'm going to recommend you a watch, and this watch is not going to be on this channel. It's going to be on a channel of a person who's been a guest to this channel many times, Kaelan Robertson. He's an Irish journalist, now full-time in Ukraine, and he had filmed a documentary. I wanted to call it a movie, but it really isn't. It's a documentary about his time in Kherson. He spent 3 days there, and he's showing you what life in a frontline city is really like, and he's showing you an insight that most people probably don't see and don't know about. I discovered a lot of new things for myself there, so imagine how many things an average person who doesn't follow the war so as closely as I do will discover. So please go watch his video and see for yourself what it's like to be a civilian person just living your life in your home next to Russians. Overnight, an airstrike on Kharkiv left 7 people injured, including a child, according to the state emergency service. The attack partially destroyed apartments on the top floor of a 9-story residential building, and windows throughout the building were shattered. Emergency and rescue operations are ongoing, with over 25 rescuers and 6 units of emergency equipment working to manage the aftermath. The Russians also attacked the center of Kharkiv and Kryvyi Rih. A rescue operation is underway in both cities. In Kharkiv, Russian bombs hit the Держпром building, House of State Industry. This building is an architectural monument and one of the first skyscrapers of the Soviet Union, which is under the protection of UNESCO. Not that it's not a useless organization that seems to really not protect anything but, good Russians abroad and their reputations. Oh, and of course the sympathy for them. The building survived the Second World War, but not the Russian invasion. In Kryvyi Rih, a three-story residential building was damaged as a result of the Russian missile strike. Preliminary reports indicate that 10 people were injured. The strike caused a fire in the building and nearby outbuildings and also resulted in damage to a medical facility, a car, and a gas pipeline. Oleg Sinehubov, the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, showcased the damage caused by a direct hit from a Russian aerial bomb on the Держprom building. He stated, "This is a monument of national significance, a constructivist building. The Russians hit the iconic symbol of the city, which every resident of Kharkiv knows." And here is a tweet from my acquaintance or internet friend, Elis Zhurovel, who is a Ukrainian activist and bases her activity mostly on Twitter, now known as X, about this building. She has been there too. She's from Kharkiv, and here is her emotion about it. The Ministry of Health reported damage to a medical facility in Kharkiv as well, where windows were broken in one of the departments of the regional hospital. Fortunately, patients were not injured. However, one medical worker was caught by broken glass. Also, during this weekend, while I came back to Kyiv, I did on Thursday, there have been several air raid alerts lasting throughout the night, and they are those of Shahed drones. There were barrages of drones coming onto Kyiv, and a lot of them, even though they were taken down or shot down by air defense, they caused a lot of damage, and some of them caused death, unfortunately. There was a drone that hit a building directly. The air defense didn't manage to shoot it down, and a 10-year-old girl died in there. And it's so incredibly upsetting. That happened in a neighborhood next door to my neighborhood, and there are actually a lot of drone parts falling in that neighborhood quite often, and it's considered to be quite a dangerous neighborhood in Kyiv to live in because of the missile debris and because of the drone debris and because of direct hits as well. And, you know, what a welcome home surprise from Russians. And it's really, it makes me feel a lot of things because, you know, while being in New York, of course, I felt very guilty because I've had my air raids on my Apple Watch and I've had them on my phone and they were going off all the time. And it's not like I just turned that off because I would feel guilty, you know. I kept them, but it didn't feel the same way because you're not there and you're not experiencing them. And now that I'm back home and I hear these air raids and they're outside of my window and they're on my phone, they're on my watch, and I see actual direct consequences of them, it makes me so, so, so angry. And it makes me angrier because, you know, I think I haven't been outside of Ukraine in quite almost a year. And I didn't see how people just don't care in the outside world. Their everyday lives are obviously not affected by anything that's happening in Ukraine. And so it doesn't even feel like most people know there is a war. And coming back to these air raids and coming back to these daily deaths and to Russia's attacks in Ukraine, it really makes you really sad and really angry, especially for how many Russians we let into the Western world and how we let them integrate into our society so easily. I'll give you a story. I'll give you a thing that happened to me that probably pissed me off more than it would piss off an average person, but here we go. I was in the West Village, which is a pretty bougie area of New York City, and one of my favorite coffee shops. It's called Blank Street Coffee, and I was waiting for my coffee. I was wearing noise-canceling headphones. There were two boys, probably ages 18 to 20, sitting at a table, and they were talking between each other. I couldn't hear, obviously, what they were saying, noise-canceling headphones. Then I came up closer to them because there was a wall of tumblers, and I really wanted to get myself like a souvenir. So I went to look at the tumblers, and I turned off noise cancellation to hear when my order was going to be ready. And I heard them speaking Russian. And it's not the kind of Russian that you hear when someone has been living in the US for a year or two, or I don't know, their whole life. It's a very proper, like, off the boat from Moscow Russian. Like, these guys had just made it here. Both of these kids were dressed, decked down in wardrobes that cost more than it would cost to buy out my apartment in Kyiv or my apartment in New York, to be honest. One of them was wearing $10,000 sunglasses. Don't ask how I know that. I was a victim of Instagram algorithm a few days earlier, which is ironic. And I saw these sunglasses and thought to myself, oh my God, who's going to buy them for $10,000? Well, that kid would. They were looking up Rolex watches to buy on their phones and talking about, how difficult their lives are and complaining about random stuff. To be honest, I kind of tuned them out because I cannot listen to Russian. It makes me want to vomit quite genuinely. But here is the problem that I have. We continuously keep letting in Russians, and not just Russians, but rich Russians. We're letting them spend money. We're letting them live easy, unbothered lives. And the kind of money that these kids had, it's not, there is no independent wealth in Russia. If their parents have enough money to buy them $10,000 sunglasses and Rolex watches on a regular Tuesday afternoon in West Village, they're connected to the government. And we are letting that money come into the United States and to the UK and to other countries. And you know what is even worse than that? These are 18 to 20-year-olds. They go to college here. You think that we are educating them and they become more Western. But in reality, what happens is these kids end up going to school with our future politicians, with our future businessmen, with our future oligarchs, with our future elite. And they become friends. And then 20 years later or 10 years later, when that kid in $10,000 sunglasses whose dad is connected to Putin wants to buy a newspaper in the West, and people have questions, some Bryce who went to college with him is going to be like, that's my friend Igor, he's fine. Because, they did vodka shots together in university 10 years earlier. And that's how we integrate Russians and normalize them in the world. We need to stop letting Russians, especially those with a lot of money, coming into the Western world, because we invite them, we normalize them, and then we create a pathway for them to take over our countries. I know it was a very long off-topic rant, but it needed to be done because I don't think we're talking about it enough, and I don't think we're talking about how we normalize this enough. In the meanwhile, North Korea is joining forces with Russia to invade Ukraine. And it's not done covertly anymore, it's done very overtly. And you know what's crazy? Almost no Western media is talking about it, and we're treating it as just another update in the war. Let me paraphrase this without, I'm going to say this without Russia, Ukraine, and North Korea. A nuclear dictatorship joins another nuclear dictatorship at war against a country in Europe. The first nuclear dictatorship has been attacking this country for the past 2.5 years. The second nuclear dictatorship has just joined the war effort. And it happens to be that same nuclear dictatorship that everyone is scared of because the leader of it is absolutely batshit crazy. How are we not making a larger deal out of this? Do we understand how ludicrous it is that we're not doing anything about it and we are just, kind of strongly condemning it and talking about it as if it's just another update? North Korea has just overtly joined Russia's invasion of Ukraine and sent its soldiers. And have you heard about it on the news as of late? Or are you seeing breaking news reports and television and newspapers flooded with it? I'm not. Because of that, people like Andrzej Duda make statements like this, and they're incredibly necessary. Polish President Andrzej Duda expressed a strong stance against any territorial concessions to Russia in Ukraine, emphasizing that such a move would be a grave error. In an interview with the Sunday Times, Duda advocated for comprehensive support to help Ukraine achieve a complete victory, underlining that giving Moscow even an inch is unacceptable. Addressing suggestions from some Western politicians that Ukraine should consider ceding part of its territory to Russia, Duda criticized this approach. He argued that no sovereign country should be expected to appease Russia by sacrificing its land. If you're so generous to Russia, why not give it a piece of your land? On what basis does Russia deserve something, especially someone else's territory? He questioned. While Duda did not directly comment on Ukraine's ability to reclaim all its occupied territories, he pointed to the numerical superiority of Russian troops. Nonetheless, his remarks underscored a clear rejection of compromising Ukraine's sovereignty as a solution to the conflict. And we should be hearing more speeches like this, because Duda is right, and especially in the face of, North Korea, again, joining forces with Russia to continuously invade Ukraine. You want to appease two nuclear dictatorships? Because there is also Iran that provides weapons to Russia, and we're not necessarily doing anything about it. China is very evidently helping Russia, if not with troops, with military equipment and chips and tech that help them invade Ukraine. We have all of these dictatorships and they're all nuclear. And we have all of them working together. And someone is still suggesting that Ukraine needs to give up territory and thinks of it as a local conflict? Right. Because some of the biggest dictatorships, the axis of evil joining forces to attack a Western allied country, is clearly a localized conflict. Anyways, here is a confirmation of what North Korea is doing in Ukraine. NATO confirms North Korean troops operating in Russia's Kursk region. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has confirmed that North Korean military forces are already active in Russia's Kursk region, according to latest intelligence. He expressed concerns over the growing military collaboration between Russia and North Korea, describing it as a significant threat to both Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Oh yes, strong condemnations, here they go. No action, strong condemnations though. Mark, I had so much hope for you. Rutte called on Russia and North Korea to immediately cease their military actions, emphasizing the risks posed by the deepening cooperation between the two nations. Yeah, because they're gonna listen to words, not force. Right, good tactics. North Korean troops in Russia, poorly trained and ill-prepared, says the Wall Street Journal. North Korean soldiers recently deployed to Russia to fight in Ukraine are poorly trained, young, and physically weak, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal. Intelligence and military analysts, based on video footage, confirmed that many of the troops appear to be in their early 20s or even teenagers, showing signs of malnutrition. I mean, we knew that. We're not surprised by that, but we also know that that's going to change because they're going to start creating programs for these guys. They're going to start, giving them monetary benefits. Obviously, Kim Jong-un is making money off of this and Russia is paying him, so he's going to be able to, in layman's terms, fatten up his country so they could be more effective. Also, just because they're ineffective and just because they're 20 or teenagers or malnutritioned right now does not mean that that doesn't create additional issues for Ukraine. There are 10,000 of them. And that's, people might think that it's the only commitment North Korea made to Russia, but I feel like we're going to start seeing more and it's just the first batch. And as we all know, the first pancake does not come out well, so the second one is going to be better. These troops are reportedly unprepared for combat in flat terrain, such as that found along the Ukrainian-Russian border. Their training has primarily focused on operations in the mountain areas, like those in South Korea, where they were trained in assassination and infrastructure destruction, rather than conventional warfare. Additionally, North Korea's military is equipped with outdated equipment, leaving its soldiers unfamiliar with the more advanced gear used in Russia. It's so funny that Russia's gear is more advanced to someone's. As a result, their adaptation to new combat environments and equipment may prove challenging. South Korea's defense minister Kim Yong-hyun referred to this initial deployment as just cannon fodder. Experts believe that while this initial group may lack experience, it could signal the beginning of deeper cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, potentially leading to the deployment of more skilled North Korean troops in the future. And that's what I was just talking about, because obviously while people are laughing at this because they're young and malnourished and maybe they're like 15 or something, like, haha, look at these North Koreans that don't even know how to use old Soviet tech because that's too tech for them. Guys, North Korea, a nuclear dictatorship, sent its troops with Russia, for Russia, to invade Ukraine. It doesn't matter whether they're skilled. It doesn't matter if they're 5 feet tall and absolutely do not know where they are and what they're doing. That is, in itself, a big red flag. That's a red line. These are two nuclear dictatorships working together, even if they sent, I don't know, like 15 guys, but it was on an official level and it was a signal of their cooperation against Ukraine and against the Western allyship. That is not okay. It's not a laughable matter. It's a matter to be addressed, and it's a matter to be addressed with force. And we need to let Ukraine strike back. We need to stop folding in front of Russia and in front of North Korea and whoever else, and we need to show them that this is not okay, and we, the West, are not going to allow it. Not laugh at it and be like, haha, whatever. It's not whatever. It's big. South Korea seems to be the only country that's actually taking it seriously. South Korea is contemplating lifting its long-standing ban on providing lethal aid to Ukraine in response to North Korea's involvement in the conflict, which includes sending troops to support Russia. According to Bloomberg, South Korean officials are considering sending some of their extensive artillery stockpiles directly to Kyiv. And I want to intervene to this article saying that they have some really advanced military tech and military vehicles. And you know what? That might have been Russia's miscalculation, because if South Korea joins this fight and starts providing Ukraine with weapons, oh, they're not going to have restrictions. And those weapons are going to be killer. This move could engage the world's two largest artillery forces in the conflict, signaling a significant shift in South Korea's stance. North Korea's recent decision to dispatch up to 10,000 troops to aid Russian forces has raised concerns among Ukraine's allies, prompting discussion on how to counter this escalation without further inflaming the situation. South Korean officials will brief NATO and the EU in Brussels regarding the details of their potential military assistance. In light of the increased military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, Ukraine's allies are exploring various responses, and none of them are the response that needs to be done, which is let Ukraine strike back, lift all the restrictions. Among the options being considered are protecting Ukrainian airspace from neighboring countries such as Poland and Romania, as well as revisiting the possibility of deploying Western personnel in Ukraine. Additionally, there are discussions with the U.S. about lifting restrictions on Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory, a measure previously viewed as a red line. The word red line is honestly one of those words that pisses me off to the brim of no return these days, because what red lines? We've crossed all of Russia's red lines, nothing has happened. Russia continuously keeps crossing our red lines and nothing happens. And the reason why Russia continuously keeps crossing our red lines is because we don't show it that we are not going to tolerate it. And it's really annoying, to be very honest with you. And annoying is the most gentle word I can use here. But also, again, can we summarize this as, hey, this is clearly not a local conflict. South Korea is changing its stance and wants to provide Ukraine with lethal aid because North Korea is joining the war. Iran, China, North Korea, and Russia are against the Western allyship, and it just keeps, these dictatorships just keep growing, and they keep adding together into one single power. How is this local? It's World War III, everybody. Can we just stop circling around it and dancing around it and admit that that's what it is? It just doesn't look like what we are used to a world war looking. Well, because we don't live in 1940s anymore. We live in 2024, soon to be 25. Congrats. We're doing everything possible for this World War III to look exactly like what we expect it to look like, while we can actually stop it in the form it is right now. But why? Sorry, I am so incredibly heated. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has arrived in Iceland for his first working visit, where he will participate in the 4th Ukraine-Northern Europe Summit. The visit aims to strengthen regional cooperation and support Ukraine's ongoing efforts in the war against Russia. Key discussion points at the summit include backing the victory plan, financing the production of weapons and long-range armaments in Ukraine, winter preparedness, maritime security measures, and efforts to limit Russia's shadow fleet. Additionally, the agenda will cover defense support, as well as training and equipping Ukrainian soldiers to enhance their military capabilities. He made several key statements at the Ukraine Nordic Countries Summit. Here they are. Brigade support. We're working on equipping our brigades, which is an urgent need. France has already helped equip one brigade, and we have arrangements for another. We invite Nordic countries to join us in forming Nordic brigades, showcasing a commitment to Europe's defense. NATO membership. We're not discussing Ukraine's NATO membership during the war, only an invitation to join NATO. This political decision would provide geopolitical clarity for Ukraine and Europe and strengthen our diplomatic stance with Russia as we approach the second peace summit. It is a formality, but a very necessary formality, and it's time to listen to Ukraine when we ask for something and we say that something is needed. We're not only thinking about ourselves here, we're thinking about the world. And in the past 2.5 years, I think we've proven to all of you that whatever we say does end up happening. And what we don't do as the Western world to aid Ukraine results in a lot more issues for both Ukraine and the Western world. Listen to us. We think both of our own safety and security and yours. Iran-Russia arms transfer. Iran has yet to transfer missiles to Russia, but in-depth negotiations are ongoing. Well, that might be difficult now that Israel destroyed all of the missile building and ammo building facilities in Iran. So maybe those negotiations are no longer ongoing. Just saying. And then, we're arriving at our final part of this segment, and that is the several key points that were made on the geopolitical scene in the past, 48 to 72 hours that I think are very important and are good signals. Very good signals, very good news, not enough, too little, too late. At the 4th Ukraine-Northern Europe Summit, President Zelenskyy emphasized that dictatorships first target societal principles through propaganda and repression, undermining people's ability to defend their beliefs. He pointed out that dictators like Putin export this lack of principles, creating gray zones of instability and a disregard for values. Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Donetsk, Luhansk. We also have Transnistria. Putin is trying to do that to the United States. He did that to Hungary. He's trying to do that to Moldova. He's trying to do that in the whole of Georgia now. These destabilizing operations are done by Russia on purpose. You know, the one thing that's missing in Russia is division. They're not divided on anything. They all hate Ukraine, they support the war, they love their president. No division. But what he creates in our countries is division, and it's step one, and we're falling for it, and have been falling for it for a while now. Zelenskyy noted that Europe has faced such threats before, and it is a defining moment again. Russia is attempting to convince nations to compromise on principles by ignoring international law and turning a blind eye to injustice under the guise of stability. Moscow's core message, he said, is that sacrificing Ukrainian territory will bring peace. But history has shown that this only leads to even greater threats. We have a chance to secure victory in Eastern Europe, preventing the need to fight in the Baltic, Poland, or the Balkans, where conflicts can be easily incited, or in African nations, whose issues affect European societies more than is often portrayed or realized, Zelenskyy stated. He argued that principles bring clarity, including the trustworthiness of commitment and the recognition of Ukraine's rights as a democratic state. Addressing NATO membership, Zelenskyy expressed frustration with leaders who equate an invitation with full membership. This is not fair. It's simply a way of saying no, he asserted, calling for honest answers and urging leaders across Europe, especially in Berlin, to support Ukraine's path to NATO membership as a protective measure against Russian aggression. Zelenskyy outlined his victory plan, which includes military deterrence, economic cooperation, additional sanctions on Russia, and gaining support from skeptical partners. He concluded, "Let's weaken Putin together. This will be our joint victory." I always say, and one of my favorite creators, one of not many women on the geopolitical and military scene of the social media about Ukraine, Anna from Ukraine, and we always say, don't help Ukraine win. Help defeat Russia, because the core and the end game here is Russia losing and defeating Russia, because Ukraine is not a problem for anyone. Russia, however, is a problem and the threat to everyone. Here is a funny little comedy thing. If North Korea joins the war, there will be no new restrictions on Ukraine's use of American weapons, Reuters with reference to the Pentagon. Oh, goody! No new restrictions? What do you mean if North Korea joins the war? North Korea has already joined the war, and you and NATO and every publication has already confirmed it, so that already happened. Oh my gosh, really? You're not going to pose new restrictions? What about the restrictions that are already there, that are preventing us from actually doing anything about North Korea joining Russia in the war? I think it's not about new restrictions, which I didn't even know that was a possibility, that there could be any more restrictions than we already have. What about the previous restrictions, like those that actually matter? What about those? Are we going to do anything about those? Clearly not. Swiss President Viola Amherd has expressed support for lifting Switzerland's ban on the re-export of weapons to Ukraine. She stated that the embargo negatively impacts both the country's defense industry and national security. However, Amherd emphasized that while Switzerland serves as a mediator in international conflicts, it would not supply weapons directly to any country engaged in active warfare. Yes, because neutrality. However, they did keep Nazi assets untouched during World War II. So neutrally. But anyways, this is actually very good news, because that allows other countries to re-export Swiss-made weapons to Ukraine without any issues that they faced before. This one's a good one, and a big one, and a very needed one. Helsinki court seizes Russian assets following Ukrainian claims. The Helsinki District Court has seized assets belonging to the Russian Federation in Finland, marking the first instance of Russian property being confiscated in connection with claims for the expropriation of property in Crimea outside of Ukraine. The claims were filed by Ukrainian companies seeking compensation for losses following Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. The seized assets include real estate valued at tens of millions of dollars. The move comes after Russia's refusal to voluntarily compensate Naftogaz, prompting the legal action to facilitate the recovery of property in favor of the Ukrainian energy company. Finally, and we are seeing this shift where a lot of profits from Russian assets are being sent to Ukraine, like the tens of billions of dollars package from the United States the other day. And it's only going to keep coming because these institutions worldwide are finally realizing that it is time to not care about the security of Russia's funds and care about compensating Ukraine because, well, Russia's never going to do that. And we know they're never going to do that unless they're forced to. And they should pay reparations to us. And now we have an opportunity to start these reparations before Russia is even defeated, while Russia is causing all of this. Anyways, that is all I have for you for today, fortunately or unfortunately. Unfortunately, because, well, hey, I'm sure you're so sad I'm leaving. But good news is I will see you in a couple of days. And also, the reason why I'm happy that this episode is over is because, well, I don't need to tell you about any more awful things that Russia is doing and any more unreasonable responses from Western allies to those things. Sorry, can you tell I'm a little heated? Anyways, a tiny little update. This segment is going to be a little different starting from the next episode. It's going to be divided into 3 parts, and the parts are going to be Ukraine axis, Russia axis, and Western axis. That way it's going to be easier to organize information, and you're not going to be nearly as lost bouncing around different news stories within the episode. So hopefully you're going to like this new format. Anyways, thank you for watching, and of course I'll see you next time. In the meanwhile, please, please, please do send this episode to a friend because, well, there is not enough news about Ukraine and about what Russia is doing to the world on TV and in your mainstream media. So, hey, send them my face, I'm not that bad. And hopefully they'll like it and continue watching it. Also, do like this video and don't forget to subscribe to The Gaze so you can watch next ones. And I will see you next time. Oh, and also, don't forget to comment your questions, suggestions, and opinions, because I do love all of them and I read all of them, even if it doesn't look like it. Sometimes I forget to like them, but I see everything. Anyways, till next time.